Hello. I'm going to load up the Q&A box. If you guys are on, you can hop over to the Q&A box. There's the link is just down the bottom middle of the webinar. And I'd love if you guys were in the chat too, and you can drop me a line and tell me where you're from. And we'll just give it one more second for everyone to sign in. Boston, all right, some Americans. Virginia, hi. Chicago, oh man, I like it, all these American friends. All right, so I'm going to get this started. So I'm hoping you guys can see that right there. Yes, you can, okay. All right, so we're jumping ahead. I have to skip back. Knowing your vision and values. Welcome to the Knowing Your Vision and Values workshop. And I just want to start by saying, you've shown up, you've made space to make this happen. You've shown up here to listen to ways that you can live your life on purpose. And I know it's hard to carve time out of your day, so welcome, and I'm glad you're here. Just so you know, I can't actively see the chat that's going on, but I will be checking in at the end of the presentation. So over this, we're going to focus on values and vision. With values, we're going to talk about why they're important, how to identify them, how it feels when you don't live in line with your values. We will talk about vision, and we're going to work through a vision setting process through the different areas of your life. We're going to also talk about mindsets and the thought work around living your life on purpose. And we will wrap it up with a Q&A as time permits. So as I said, that Q&A box, you can just drop your questions in there. All right, so before we get started, I just wanted to let you know who you're actually listening to. I'm not sure how many of you are regular Simple on Purpose followers. So I am Shawna. I am your nerdy girlfriend from Simple on Purpose. In my adult life, kind of started out with me working as a health inspector. And I started blogging right after my first son was born. 8 years ago, it was an emergency C-section, and it was a really difficult experience for me. And I just wanted to give that experience a place to live where other women could come and feel like they weren't so alone. So I started blogging, and then I quit work after my second was born. And then my third came along. So I had 3 kids in 3.5 years. You might have heard my story before, but this was a really hard time in my life, especially with the second baby that kind of came into our life. It was rocky, my health was poor, my relationships were suffering, my marriage was just really struggling. I was overwhelmed and anxious and restless and frustrated. And then I learned about decluttering. And I kind of had this overwhelm in my brain, in my heart, in my home, in my life. And it was something like I had permission to let some of that go. And decluttering is an emotional process. And I spent a lot of time specifically in my basement going through item by item and getting rid of it and just letting layers and distractions kind of peel away. And then this is the basement after we had decluttered, and we built a playroom for the kids for Christmas. And then the next year we built them that fort. And it was, it's kind of symbolic of clearing that space in my home was also clearing the space in my life where I could make room for what I really wanted. Because what I had seen was, as my space was cluttered, so was myself. I had just kind of lived on autopilot and built up this life by default, and I wasn't being responsible for it. I didn't want to live like this. I wanted to enjoy motherhood. I wanted a better marriage. I wanted to be a better friend. I wanted to be healthier. I wanted to live my life on purpose. So that started me on this journey for intentional living, as it's usually called. And it's been about 5 years I've been working on goals and habits and mindsets. And over this time, I've also become a life coach too. So I've taken what I've learned from myself and what I use with my life coaching clients, and I put it into the Life on Purpose workbook. And that is where this workshop is coming from. Knowing your values and vision is the first step. It's just getting started with the Life on Purpose. And I wanted to make this workshop for you guys so that no matter where you're at, you own a book, you don't, you have just a sheet of paper, you've got the worksheets, wherever you're at, I want to help you take the time and give you some tools to just get started on it. All right. So as we jump in, we're going to start with one question, and there's space on your worksheet to fill this out. There is not space in the workbook, so use the notes page on page 91. And I want you to just take a minute and jot down, what does your life feel like? So now we're going to look up from this space, from being down in the grind. We're going to look up and look at a destination. What do you want your life to feel like? Go ahead and take some time to write down your notes. All right, so what you did there was an evaluation and a visioning. And visioning is one of the most powerful things that your brain can do, and we're going to talk about more of that in a bit. But you can see this process, it doesn't require anything special. It just is stopping and asking yourself, what do I want my life to look like? You can imagine where you are, what you're doing, who's around you. Visioning is the practice of getting more in tune with yourself. It's the practice of listening to yourself. And as you vision, you're going to see in that vision some values and some feelings that you are trying to achieve. And this is important because we are motivated by feelings. It's so important to pay attention to the feelings that we see in our vision. Because everything you want in life, everything you're trying to do every day is because of the feeling you think it's going to give you. So I want you to take another minute, go back to the notes you just wrote about what you want your life to feel like. And I want you to highlight any really motivating feelings that you see in there, feelings that you really are passionate about seeking in your life. All right, so now we're making the connection. We might know how we want to feel, but we're not always pursuing those feelings in ways that serve us or empower us, because sometimes we forget to consider our values in how we are chasing these feelings. So what are values? I mean, it sounds like a businessy thing to talk about values, but we all have them. They are those kind of core identity tenets we want to live by. So we might feel that we are someone who is environmentally friendly. That's our personal value. We might be someone who wants to be a peaceful person, and that's a personal value for us. And here is the problem. When we don't honor our values, when we don't live in an environmentally friendly way, when we are doing something that's not in line with our values, we feel this tension, this frustration. We feel like something is off. We're kind of frustrated. We don't feel like ourselves. When we're not honoring our values, we can just kind of turn to the next best thing that's going to make us feel better instead of turning back to our values. And we'll look at our life and say, oh, this is what I want to have, but this is what I do have. So something's wrong, and it's probably me, or we project it out. It's probably my spouse, or it's probably my job, or it's probably this or that. We just have to get back to our values. You aren't broken. You've just kind of been on autopilot, and you've lost that connection to your values. And there's 3 ways that we commonly lose connection to our values. Our first one is that we haven't even identified them. So maybe it's that you haven't even taken time to think, what is important to me as a person? How do I want to show up as a person? It could be that they are inauthentic, so they were probably values from our parents or some authority figure. Or it could be that we have become disconnected through them. We have been disconnected from them through maybe some identity shift. We've changed jobs, we've been retired, we became a mom, or that we've just had a really hard season of life and we've kind of lost touch with those values. So I'm going to load up a sheet that has a list of values on it, and I want you to just take a minute and write down some of your values. So this is page 2 of the worksheet, and if you're in the workbook, it's pages 12 and 13. And I want you to just look at this list here and take a few minutes to jot down what's popping up for you, what's important to you for how you show up in your life. Oops, sorry guys, there we go. So some of the feedback I've gotten from people who go through the Life on Purpose workbook is when I ask them to challenge their values, they are actually realizing that some of the values they initially put on their list aren't actual values that they do want to move forward with. So it's really important that we make this list, but then also that we edit it. So I have 3 questions to think about, and I want you to look at your list of values and think about these 3 questions. The first one is this I should have this value? Maybe you feel like it's a moral obligation to have this value, or it's just what people do. It's what a good mom does or a good wife does. It's just something that's on your should list. The second question to ask is this a value that reflects how I was raised or how I want to be now? And the final question you can ask is, when I look at this, does it make me feel exhausted or energized? So I want you to take another second and quickly look at your list again. Cross off just any ones that you know don't belong on there. So how do you use your values? You have this list, and what do you do with them? Well, the important thing to know is this list is your rough draft, and you can edit it as you go along. You can spend some more time with it. But what at the end of the day, your list is, if you can narrow it down to about 5, maybe 10, depending on how you're feeling, is these values inform you on how you want to show up for this season of your life. They are your priority. When you have an opportunity to spend money or time or energy, these are the filter you put them through. You can have values as a family that you decide. You can have personal values in how you approach your work, or, it's all going to apply to all the categories of your life. But they are your filter. They're what you say yes and no to in your time, your money, your resources. It's what you want to work towards. So when you have edited your list, compile them in a way that motivates you. Maybe you just write them on your bathroom mirror. Maybe you make a vision board. Maybe you put them into a poem or get scripture that reflects them. So use these values. And the things that you may notice about these values is they will change. As you kind of shift and integrate a value into your life, it becomes lower on the priority scale. So when I quit my job as a health inspector, I knew that any job I had going forward, I wanted to have total autonomy in it. And now I'm blogging and I'm life coaching. And as I do this job and I have all this freedom, that value has gone down in importance for me. The other thing to notice is that they are totally unique. And I think I have it here. So my husband and I have gone through and set our values, and we've circled them all here. And I think we've each circled about 20 values to start, and we only had one in common. And maybe our initial reaction is to kind of like start a debate on whose values are superior and that they should come over to our side and they should live like this. But it's such a beautiful thing to just let people be who they are, because our personal mission is to live in line with these values. This is what motivates us and inspires us to show up in a way that feels truer to who we are. So we've done a little bit of visioning, and I want you to stop and just take yourself back to envisioning what your life feels like. When you can get very detailed on who's there, what it smells like, what it feels like, when you are just kind of getting into that moment and recreating the scene in your mind, what is actually happening in your brain is something incredible. Visualizing an experience, getting really detailed on it, is helping our brain to make new pathways and connections, because your brain treats the mental practice of visualization as if it's actually happening. We are making new neural connections in our brain. There are many studies that show that groups that visualize themselves accomplishing something makes them more successful in achieving this goal that they have visualized. And I even read a study of people who imagine themselves lifting certain weights are activating the same parts of their brain as the people who are doing the physical weightlifting. It's really kind of amazing. Visualization helps kind of retrain your brain to shift out of this autopilot mode. And why does autopilot matter? Like, what is autopilot? So autopilot are the thoughts that just pop into our head. It's first thing in the morning. What do you think about? It's when your kids are having a tantrum, or when your friend says something that you feel insecure about, or your husband says he's working late. All of your reactions are actually thought loops that are just running, and we've learned them over time. They're just in the background and we don't even realize it. Coaches and therapists call this the programming. They're the stories that we believe about ourselves, about the world, and they've been built up from how we've been raised, to our culture, to our experiences, and what we were taught, and how we interpret things. And our brain is so efficient, it doesn't question if these things are true. It just treats our thoughts as facts and not stories, and it's doing the same thing it's always done. Our brains are wonderful and powerful, but they are just running the program that we are telling them to. So I put a list here of being on autopilot versus being very mindful of what you're thinking and what's happening in your life because of that. So when we're on autopilot, we're kind of stuck, like our thoughts are stuck, this thought loop that we always have, kind of like tracks in the snow. And when we can shift out of that, we can say, oh, I'm allowed to think something different. And that's really great. When we're in autopilot, we're overwhelmed because we don't see how much responsibility and control we can have. We kind of, like for me, I definitely just became the victim instead of being the one who was responsible. We are pretty unaware, and that's in regards to our thought life, with what we're thinking, how it's making us feel, and how it's making us show up in the world. And we're very reactive. When we're on autopilot, the day just happens at us. We're just putting out fires. We don't feel like we're really in control. We don't really feel like we're managing things well, versus being very proactive and deciding in advance what we want and how we want to show up. And interrupting the autopilot is very important. And one way to do this is to just stop and ask ourselves what we want. We need to ask ourselves what is true, and we need to choose thoughts that are empowering. For me, I don't know if you guys have experienced this, but for me, my life looked like making all of the safe decisions. It's definitely how I was raised and the culture that I grew up in. So it was, going to college, getting a stable job, getting married, buying the house, and having kids. And I did all these things. I checked all these boxes, but I was really unhappy. And then I realized this is someone else's checklist. This isn't my definition of success. This isn't what I wanted life to look like. So I had to start thinking about, what is the life that I crave? If I could redefine success for myself, what would it look like? And my first response is to set goals. And that's something that I did. And through trial and error, I learned that something is missing. I think that many of us feel this tension that maybe life isn't exactly what we want, and we want to change it. We feel like inspired. Okay, let's make a change. And so we set some goals. And I'll run a marathon, I'll lose 10 pounds, I'll become a morning person. It seems like a really good remedy, but what most of us find is that we get overwhelmed at this goal. Maybe we don't even start it, or we just lose heart along the way and we don't finish it. Or maybe we finish it and then we feel just as unhappy as before. And then if you're like me, maybe you think, well, I'm maybe just not a goals person. And I kind of had the story in my brain that maybe I'm lazy and unmotivated. Ultimately, I'm feeling crappier than I did in the first place. The problem was, I didn't know where I wanted to end up. I was just kind of throwing things at the wall and seeing what would stick. I was making goals without setting a vision first. And when I went over this with my husband, he asked me to clarify a little bit more about the difference between values and vision and goals and habits. And it's explained in the Life on Purpose workbook, but I want to take a minute and show you this here. So imagine you're going on a road trip. Your vision is where you're going. It's the destination. Your goals and habits are the map that you follow, and the U-turns that you take and stuff like that. And the values you have, it's kind of the atmosphere, like the playlist that would be happening. If I could compare this maybe to a vision that you have for your home, where you kind of want, your vision for your home is like a clear and welcoming and fresh space. And then your goals and habits would be how you get there. So maybe home repairs, or home renos, decluttering, maybe cleaning routines. And then your values, it's the atmosphere of the house. It's how you show up all along the way. It is maybe an atmosphere that is hospitable and inviting and relaxed and ordered. So now we're going to start the whole life vision, and setting this vision is going to help you set better goals for each of these areas of your life. And this is a practice that many coaches use, and it's something that I use with my coaching clients. We go through 9 categories of the life, of a person's life. And it's important to remember you can't skip a category, because really we're all of these things. And when we're really strong in one area, it can bolster up other areas. When we're feeling weak in one, it can kind of seep into the other places of our life. So we're going to go through a quick visioning process. In the Life on Purpose workbook, each category has about 5 to 10 prompts to help you set a vision. And I'm going to share a couple, 1 or 2 for each category here. And what I want you to do is just take that question and just brainstorm on paper, kind of brain dump everything that's popping into your brain. It's important to remember that you aren't bound by anything you write down. This is just an opportunity to kind of unload the brain. And it's a process of getting to know yourself, really, of what's in there. So we're going to go through each category, and I want you to consider each category as being for the next 2 to 5 years of your life. All right, so we're going to start with home, and I'm going to give you a minute with each one. If you're in the Life on Purpose workbook, this is on page 18. Home. What do I want my home to feel like, and what makes me feel like I'm running my home well? All right, you might find that you have a lot to write or you might not have a lot, but let's just keep going along. We're going to spend about a minute on each. The next category is family. It's on page 23 if you're in the workbook. How do I want to show up as a parent, and what things do I want to teach my kids? And we'll move on to love. And this is kind of any love relationship you're in. How do I want to show up in my marriage? Let's move on to health. What do I want healthy living to look like in my life? And now we'll go on to friendships and community. What types of friendships do I want to pour into? And how can I show up and be a friend to others? Now we'll move on to work. And this is page 43 in the workbook. And work can be anything paid or volunteer or kind of anything that you're personally working towards in your own life. What work do I find fulfilling? What is the next interesting thing that I could pursue in my work? Outer expression. Outer expression is kind of how you show up creatively in the world or what you do that makes you feel like you are reflecting yourself or expressing yourself. Hobbies, creativity, recreation. Maybe for some people it's home decor or style. So, whatever outer expression is important to you, consider what makes me feel inspired, creative, alive. And what are things I loved to do as a kid that I want to try again? And now we'll move on to inner expression. And inner expression is your emotional life, it's your spiritual life, it's a personal growth experience that you undertake and your personal self development, leaning into learning and higher meaning and those things that you feel help form you emotionally and spiritually. So, questions that you can use to set your vision here. How do I want to grow emotionally and spiritually? And another question you can ask is what inner expression practices do I want to be part of my daily life? And we're going to move on to the last category, and that's finances. The question here is what lifestyle is important to me and how do my finances support that? So, this is taking into consideration the mindless ways we spend and the way we actually want to be putting our money to build up the life we do want. So there are two more pages in the worksheets that you have, and this is going to be the further work that you can do. The first is to finish your values list and finish rounding out the vision that you have. And then you take the page 8 on the worksheet, and it's page 68 in the workbook, and you will put the values you have for each category of your life. Because like I said, they will be different. In the values you have for your health are going to be different than the values you have for outer expression. So if you can take about 3 to 5 values, and I'm not sure if you guys can also see me um, in the video, but in the Life on Purpose workbook, we have put about 3 different values we have for the different categories of our life. And they should be different from each other, but they will probably all reflect back to that kind of master list that you have of about 5 to 10 personal values. And the reason why this is important is because these values are going to help you decide how you show up for life in the way that empowers you. So deciding how you want to show up is more important than deciding where you want to go. If me and Connor take out the kids sledding for the day and we want to go and have like this family fun adventure, but I spend the day barking at the kids and nagging my husband, like it's game over. I have not honored my values. I might have done the thing I wanted to do, but I showed up in a really crappy way. When we are showing up in line with our values, we feel more peaceful. We feel more passionate. We feel like we can just enjoy what is happening around us. We feel authentic. We feel like ourselves. So there will be times where you will need to stop and be mindful of this. You'll need to stop and check in. And if you feel like you're chasing a vision or working on goals and habits and it's just feeling like it's draining you, you need to kind of center back in on your values. And you can do that by setting reminders in your phone maybe and checking in. And you can also do that by preparing for it. So for example, as a family in about like 7 years, we want to travel across Canada together. And I know how I want to show up as a parent. I know how I want to show up in how I run my finances. And I need to find a way to pursue that vision and just still make sure I'm meeting my values. So how am I going to get like all 5 of us in a camper and still be like living peacefully and proactively together? It makes me consider the saying, peace at all costs is not peace. And it just helps me remember that I can't steamroll what I want to do at the sacrifice of how I'm showing up. So this is the work. Let the work that you've been doing today be the framework. For me, like I keep these books on my kitchen table, on my coffee table, like my planner. I'm talking about my planner or this. And it's something that I spend time just looking over. Spend your time refining your values list, refining your vision. Talk to your partner about it, to your family about it. This can be something that you guys are doing alongside each other. In the Life on Purpose workbook, actually Connor and I share it, and we just write in different colors. And it's just something that doesn't have to be done in one day. If you feel a little bit overwhelmed right now, just remember you don't have to do this all in one day. This is the big thing that you're working towards. This is like the journey, as kind of corny as it may sound. And the trick is to just have fun with it and keep looking for ways to put it into your life. So that summarizes the beginning of starting Life on Purpose. And I just want to say congratulations to those of you who have put pen to paper, who have kind of brain dumped and just started the process at living the life that you want to live.